Welcome to A Look into the Unknown. Today, we're diving into one of those mysteries that just makes you go, huh.
Hmm.
The Bélmez Faces. Imagine this. You're in your kitchen in Spain,
Oh, yeah.
and suddenly human-like faces start appearing in your concrete floor. For over 30 years, these faces have been popping up in Bélmez, disappearing and reappearing, leaving everyone scratching their heads. Are we dealing with a paranormal phenomenon, a clever hoax, or something else entirely? Let's investigate.
It is the kind of story that really grabs you. The mystery began back in 1971 in the home of Maria Gomez Camara. One day, a face just materialized on her kitchen floor. No paint, no nothing, just a face embedded in the concrete.
You know, when I first heard about this, I thought it had to be a prank. But the story gets even weirder because Marie's family actually tried to destroy the image.
Yeah.
Chipped it away, poured fresh concrete, the whole 9 yards, and you know what happened.
Another face appeared,
Yeah.
and then another. It became this ongoing phenomenon, almost like the house itself was communicating.
Okay, so that's where things start to get really interesting. We've got these faces appearing out of nowhere with no clear explanation. Naturally, people started coming up with theories.
Exactly. The two main camps are pretty clear-cut. The skeptics and the believers. Let's start with the skeptics, because their arguments are rooted in good old-fashioned science. Researchers like Luis Ruiz Noguez took a hard look at the faces, and they found traces of pigments like lead and chromium. That led them to believe that someone, possibly even Maria's family, was creating these images, using paint or some kind of chemical reaction.
So basically, they're saying it's a big elaborate hoax. But why go through all that trouble?
Well, the house became a huge tourist attraction. Think about it. People coming from all over the world to see these mysterious faces. That kind of attention can be pretty profitable, and some researchers believe that's the most logical explanation for the Bélmez Faces.
That makes sense. But then we have the other side of the coin, the folks who believe in the paranormal. They point to something called photography.
Ah, yes, thoughtography. It's the idea that our thoughts and emotions can actually leave a physical imprint on the world around us. Researchers like Hans Bender, who spent his whole career studying parapsychology, believe that Maria, or perhaps even a previous resident of the house, could have unconsciously created these faces with their mind.
Wow, so we're talking about psychic energy actually manifesting in concrete. It's a wild concept. But how do you even begin to prove something like that?
That's the challenge, isn't it? It's difficult to study these kinds of phenomena using traditional scientific methods. But even with the scientific analyses, the Bélmez Faces managed to throw a curveball. The Institute of Ceramics and Glass, or ICV, analyzed samples of the faces, and they couldn't find any traces of paint.
Wait, so if there's no paint, how did the images get there?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one that has fueled the debate for decades. The ICV results don't necessarily prove the paranormal, but they definitely add another layer of intrigue to the whole case.
Hold on, because I remember reading something about silver nitrate being involved. Could that be a possible explanation?
It's one of the theories that's been tossed around. Silver nitrate is a chemical that's very sensitive to light, and when it's exposed to light, it turns dark. Some researchers have suggested that someone could have used silver nitrate to create the faces, perhaps by applying it to the concrete and then exposing it to light in specific patterns.
That sounds pretty complicated, but I guess if someone was determined enough, it's possible they could pull it off.
Exactly, and that's what makes this case so fascinating. You have these seemingly contradictory pieces of evidence, pigments that suggest a hoax, but no paint found in the actual images. It's enough to make anyone's head spin. And this is where the scientific analysis gets even more complicated, because it's not just about the presence or absence of paint. The chemical composition of the concrete itself has also been studied.
So what are they looking for in the concrete? Some kind of secret ingredient that explains how the faces formed?
Well, they're trying to understand if there's anything unusual about the concrete that could have made it more susceptible to these kinds of markings. Some researchers believe that certain types of concrete, especially older ones, might react in unpredictable ways, with chemical agents or even with moisture in the environment.
That's fascinating. So the concrete itself could be part of the mystery. But even with all this analysis, we still haven't gotten a definitive answer.
Right. And to make things even more complicated, a Spanish TV show called Cuarto Milenio decided to conduct their own investigation in 2014. They brought in a chemical engineer, Jose Javier Gresanea, and a forensic criminalist, Luis Alamancos, to examine the faces.
Okay, so we've got a fresh set of eyes on the case. What did they find?
Their findings were pretty significant. Gresanea analyzed samples of the faces and found absolutely no evidence of paint or any kind of external manipulation. He concluded that the images were formed within the concrete itself.
Wait, so no paint, no external manipulation. How is that even possible?
That's exactly what Alamancos wanted to figure out. He tried to recreate the faces using every technique imaginable. Concrete solvents, acids, even silver nitrate. But no matter what he tried, he couldn't replicate the images.
He couldn't replicate them at all. That's incredible. You'd think with modern science we'd be able to figure out something like this.
You would think so, wouldn't you? Alamancos himself was completely baffled. His expertise in forensics couldn't explain how these images formed, which just adds more fuel to the mystery.
So where does that leave us? We've got these faces appearing in concrete, no signs of paint, and a forensic expert who's basically throwing his hands up in the air.
It's a real head-scratcher. But there's another twist to the story that we need to talk about. Maria Gomez Camara, the woman who first reported the faces, passed away in 2004. And you wouldn't believe what happened after her death.
New faces appeared.
You got it. They're called the new Bélmez Faces. And they appeared in different parts of the house, years after Maria's passing.
Wow, so even after the original witness is gone, the faces keep coming. This is getting more and more mysterious. But are these new faces the real deal? Or could someone be trying to keep the story alive?
That's a great question. And it leads us back to the skeptics. Journalist Javier Cabanilles and investigator Francisco Mañez have been pretty vocal in their belief that the whole thing was a scam, orchestrated by Maria's family. They even wrote a book about it, alleging that the faces were deliberately created to exploit the public's fascination with the paranormal.
So are they saying the new Bélmez faces are just a continuation of the hoax? But if that's the case, how do they explain the scientific analyses? That couldn't find any evidence of paint or manipulation.
That's the crux of the debate, isn't it? You have evidence that seems to support both sides of the argument. The skeptics point to the potential for financial gain, and the lack of a clear scientific explanation for the phenomenon.
And the believers.
Yeah.
What are their strongest arguments?
They emphasize the testimony of Maria Gomez Camara and other witnesses, who claim to have seen the faces appear and disappear in real time. They also point to the ICV analysis and Alamancos' failed attempts at replication, as evidence that there's something more to this than just a simple hoax.
So we're left with this fascinating puzzle. On one hand, we have the possibility of a clever, long-running hoax. On the other hand, we have the possibility of a genuine paranormal phenomenon that defies our current understanding of science.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of this case, isn't it? It forces us to grapple with the unknown, to question what we think we know, and to be open to the possibility that there are things in this world that we may never fully understand.
I have to admit, I'm leaning towards the paranormal side. It's just too strange, too many unexplainable details. But I know you always encourage us to be critical thinkers, to look at things from multiple angles.
And that's exactly what we've been doing throughout this deep dive. We've looked at the scientific evidence, the paranormal theories, the arguments for and against hoax, but ultimately you, the listener, get to decide what you believe.
It's like we've given you all the pieces of the puzzle, but it's up to you to put them together and come up with your own picture of what happened in that house in Bélmez.
And that's the most exciting part of these deep dives. You get to be the detective. You weigh the evidence, consider the different perspectives, and ultimately come to your own conclusions.
You know, after going through all this research, I have to say, the Bélmez Faces have really captured my imagination. It's a story that has everything. Mystery science, the paranormal, and even a dash of human drama.
It's a story that taps into something deep within us, wouldn't you say? That fascination with the unknown. The possibility that there are forces at work in the universe that we don't fully comprehend.
Absolutely. And I think that's why the Bélmez Faces have resonated with people for so many years. It's a story that challenges our understanding of the world and reminds us that there are still mysteries out there waiting to be solved.
Speaking of mysteries, if you're eager to learn more about the Bélmez Faces, there are plenty of resources available online. You can find photos, videos, and even first-hand accounts from people who visited the house.
And for a visual deep dive, I highly recommend checking out the YouTube channel, A Look into the Unknown. They have some fantastic videos on the Bélmez Faces, with all the details and different perspectives we've been discussing.
It's a great way to see the faces for yourself and get a sense of the mystery that surrounds them. And if you're interested in exploring the scientific side of things a bit further, I suggest looking into the work of Luis Ruiz-Noguez and Manuel Martin Serrano. They've done extensive research on the chemical composition of the faces and the concrete, and their findings are quite compelling.
Great recommendations. And for our listeners who are fascinated by the paranormal aspects of this case, The work of Hans Bender and Jamon de Argumosa is a great place to start. They were pioneers in parapsychological research and offer some thought-provoking insights into the possibility of thoughtography and other psychic phenomena.
Remember, there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to the Bélmez Faces. It's all about exploring the possibilities, weighing the evidence, and forming your own conclusions.
Exactly. And as with all our deep dives, we encourage you to keep an open mind, question what you think you know, and never stop exploring the unknown. Who knows what other mysteries are out there waiting to be discovered?
Until next time, keep looking into the unknown. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find some answers, or even more questions.
And don't forget to check out A Look into the Unknown on YouTube for a visual journey into the world of unexplained phenomena.